Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. I'm Alex Hattingh, Chief People Officer at Employment Hero, where I'm thrilled that we are just obsessed with making employment easier and more valuable for everyone. I'm sure you've all heard and read about the Great Resignation as we emerge out of COVID, and we're already seeing this in countries like the UK. So the question is, will we see it here in Australia? So to find out, we surveyed 1,000 people from small to medium businesses in September. So what did our insights tell us? A whopping 40% of Australians plan to look for a new job in the next 6 months, and 15% of employees from small to medium businesses are already on the hunt for a new role. Interestingly, younger workers aged between 18 and 24 are at a 66% already looking for a new role. And what did our research tell us about why Australians are looking to leave their jobs? The top 3 reasons were lack of career opportunities at 31%, no pay rise at 30%, and lack of appreciation and recognition at 26%. So the risk is already here. And today we're going to talk about how to attract and hire the best talent for your open roles. Firstly, I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce the wonderful Sinead Connolly, Director and co-founder of award-winning recruitment firm Lotus People. Hey Sinead, welcome. Arriving from London to Sydney in 2010 and commencing a career in recruitment, Sinead quickly identified an opportunity in the market to start a dynamic and progressive recruitment agency with a sincere focus on treating candidates really well. Lotus People was born in 2015 and has since won multiple awards for its internal culture and its incredible candidate experience. Sinead applies her experience within the industry, her passion for people, and her commercial mindset to run Lotus. She's created a highly engaged, high-performing team and culture, and also a finalist and winner of multiple industry awards with a focus on balance, culture, and adding value. Sinead has led Lotus People from strength to strength. Secondly, I'm thrilled to introduce Kate Jolly, my team member. Kate started her career in London recruiting for big businesses such as L'Oreal, Marks and Spencer, and Sainsbury's. Kate soon found a passion for startups and small businesses, and she's specialised in this space ever since. Kate currently co-leads the talent function for us at Employment Hero. She has a wealth of experience hiring in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. And Kate has made a significant impact on Employment Hero in her role. So today we're going to start off with talking about pre- and post-pandemic talent markets. Sinead, I'd love to start with you. Prior to COVID, what did the talent market look like?
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. So pre-COVID, I have to tell you, it feels like a distant memory at this stage. But I think before the pandemic hit, we were in the busiest market that we've ever seen. The economy was in a really strong position. Job ads online were at a record high. Unemployment was at record lows. There was definitely still a shortage of talent, but it was a lot easier to find people. And we obviously had the ability to rely on incoming talent from overseas, which we obviously don't at the moment. I think from an agency perspective, we worked with small and medium-sized businesses who didn't necessarily have the channels to recruit, or perhaps didn't have the processes or strategies in place. And so that, coupled with kind of being time poor, meant that they were coming to a recruitment agency. Whereas now I think SMBs are in a position where they're coming to us because they genuinely can't find the talent. And we'll talk more about what it looks like now. But I definitely think that is one of the biggest differences that we've seen of where the market is now versus where it was before the pandemic.
Fantastic. And what was the recruitment experience like for candidates?
The recruitment experience for candidates, I think, is just something that needs to have been disrupted. And I think it has changed a lot, but we're all very familiar with the statistics, and anecdotally we hear that candidates have a terrible time with recruitment processes. Usually they often don't receive feedback. I still speak to candidates of all levels who tell us that they are left wondering, they didn't hear back from an interview ever, and they just don't know where they stand. So prior to COVID, it was definitely a situation where candidates were kind of not very happy with the recruitment process. And that definitely still happens, but I do think it's changed a lot over the last couple of years.
And congratulations on your approach. You know, with candidate experience, I know you get back to everyone, and I think you've been listed in the final 5 for the upcoming SEEK awards for the best recruitment agency for candidate experience, which is great. And it just goes to show how important it is. And so Sinead, what was the recruitment experience like for those on the hiring end of the table?
Yeah, thank you. And you're right, it is so important. And I think with the rise of online reviews and at the ease in which we can share feedback now, it definitely encourages a more candidate first approach, which is fantastic. From the hiring perspective, I think there was always shortages. And I think some verticals, some areas, technology, for example, have historically been skills short in Australia. And it goes without saying that in comparison to now, I think organizations had their pick of candidates. I think now they are in a very different position. Prior to the pandemic, it felt like organizations had the luxury of running long processes and taking their time with decisions, and really just feeling like they were in control of the process. Whereas I think that has flipped entirely in the market that we're in now, which I know we'll speak more about.
Great. And over to you, Kate. Would you agree? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, could not agree more, basically. Australia has always, as far as I've been aware, had what we would refer to as a tight labour market. So that means that there are several different economic factors that mean that it's quite difficult to hire skilled workers here. It's to do with things like migration policies, unemployment rates, and that's always been the case. Conversely, it's a few years ago now, it's maybe 4 years since I recruited in London, but when I was based over there, it was definitely more candidate rich. It still could be tough and competitive sometimes, but it was never quite as tough as I suppose I found it in Sydney. And I guess a really good thing to kind of illustrate that would be, I remember when I first started my career in recruitment in London, and we had this concept of sending shortlists. So you worked for an agency, you took on a role, and it was like you would have to find 5 or 6 suitable candidates and send them all across at the same time to the potential hiring manager. So you could interview someone fantastic, and then you just wait for 2 weeks to send them across. As soon as I moved to Sydney, it was like, as soon as you've got someone, send them. We don't have time. They kind of, you just have to go for it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kate. I'll stick with you on the next question. How do you think the talent market has changed since then?
Sorry to report that in Australia, it's definitely become tougher. So as I touched on before, one of the things that kind of helps Australia with the talent shortage is an influx of migrants. Due to what's been happening with COVID and the border closures, it has become even more challenging. And I'm sorry to say that the UK is following suit. I don't know if that's because of COVID. I don't know if it's because of Brexit. There are probably several factors that have impacted it. But we've been hiring in the UK for the last 12 months, and it has been tough. It is really competitive. Candidates have got high standards, and they're in several different processes.
Thank you. And Sinead, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Kate. I think it has genuinely changed so much. And from an agency perspective, we have great insight into so many different sectors and businesses, and it has changed across the board. I think overall we have fewer candidates in the market. We kind of the less spoken about data is the people who actually left Australia during the pandemic as it was first hitting in 2020, whether it was because of temporary visas or lack of work or kind of redundancies. All of that was happening obviously at the time. Obviously certain industries have been impacted way more than others. Of course, we've naturally had the border closures and haven't been able to have any talent coming in. I also think job security has been a huge consideration for candidates more than ever. Salary has bumped down the list of top priorities for people looking for work, and people are less willing to take risks when it comes to kind of taking on their next role. As well as that, we've obviously got recruitment processes are predominantly virtual now. It's kind of common to maybe include one face-to-face if possible, but many recruitment processes are entirely virtual. So I think the biggest thing out of all of it that we've seen as an agency that happened after the first lockdown, but it's been reinforced after the second one, is people just genuinely wanting to work for values-based businesses and really wanting to kind of feel like they are in a business that has a people first approach. And I think organizations really need to have a look at their internal values, have a look at how they're articulating those. But that's definitely been a huge shift and a huge change. And that obviously ties in with flexibility and remote working and that kind of approach as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Our insights study certainly showed, to your point, that salary has bumped down the list and people are looking for flexibility, career development and job security as well as a really meaningful, purposeful company. Mm-hmm. I'd love to move on to talk about the candidate expectations. So Sinead, we've established that the candidate experience has changed. What do you think candidates are expecting from businesses in their recruitment journey?
Yeah, look, I think it's always been that having a positive recruitment journey or recruitment experience for a candidate has been a nice to have. It's not, it hasn't always been an expectation. It's been that if you have a pleasant and positive experience with an organization, that's great. But I think that is shifting to being a minimum expectation in this market. So I think the most important thing that they're looking for is communication and transparency. I'm really passionate about this. As you touched on, Alex, my business is built on the foundation of candidate experience, client experience, people experience, treating people well. And I think from a human kindness perspective, it's only right that someone who engages with your business to think about their next move, to think about their kind of next career, it's really important to give them feedback and let them know where they stand. But as I said, it wasn't always being done. I think with where we sit now, businesses have to do this. They have to do it, because if you don't update your candidates, if you don't inform them throughout the process, if you don't provide consistent feedback as you have these regular touch points, you're not leaving a good impression. You're not kind of leaving them with a positive idea of the business. And I think how you make candidates feel throughout the recruitment process is as important now than it ever has been.
I love that, human kindness. That's such a great approach. And do you think businesses have adapted yet in your experience of working with them currently?
I think so. I think they're trying to. I think the best businesses, and we do a lot of work with SMBs, and I think the best ones are overhauling their talent and recruitment function. I think those who are perhaps kind of tunnel visioning and just getting through to the end of the year and maybe putting this on the agenda for 2022, I think they'll lose out. I think the businesses that I've seen kind of do well within this area, when they don't have the resources of a massive organization or enterprise, they are just pulling apart what their candidate journey looks like and what their recruitment process looks like. So really understanding, where are all the touch points? What can we automate within this process to leave a positive experience? Who within our business is involved in the recruitment process, and how can we hold them accountable to things like timely feedback and communication, and how do we upskill our managers and our individuals who are involved in the process? How can we coach them? How can we upskill them? How can we leave them in a position where they're giving the best representation of the business to everyone who walks through the door? I think every potential employee who walks through the door at the moment, you have to see that as an opportunity to really paint a positive picture of the business. And obviously, in a very kind of talent short market, it's harder and harder to get people through the door. So it's so important to make sure that once they're in the process, that care is being taken to make sure that they are having a good experience.
And I'm sure you must see some candidates, because they're able to be really honest with you about hiring managers, do they just pull out of the process if they have that bad experience?
100%. And we actually track, we have surveys, we use Recruiter Insider, which is a survey platform, and it tracks every single stage of the recruitment process. It reviews us and how we've done, but it also reviews our clients. And we actually have to sit down with some businesses and say, look, we're doing a great job in our candidate experience, in how we're representing you, but where you're falling down is that your managers aren't equipped to conduct these interviews. And it's amazing to have that data, but we obviously can take that data from a number of different businesses. But you're exactly right. So many candidates, unless we're coaching our clients at the moment to say, if we're spending so much time finding these people, once they're in the room, like, you have to realize that it's a level playing field, if not swinging more in favor of the candidate at the moment. So it can't just be a kind of look people up and down, are you right for us, sell yourself to me type mentality, because that's just not the way of this market, and you'll end up kind of with no staff to hire.
Yeah, so true. And over to you, Kate, you've done a phenomenal job in pivoting since we've moved to virtual recruitment. What are some of the changes you've made at Employment Hero to the candidate process and experience?
Yeah, so the first big one that I would really strongly recommend is, if you have a long hiring process, please shorten it. If you are running a 5-step interview process and your competitor is doing the same thing in 2 stages, a candidate will receive an offer from them, and it will be competitive and it will sound like a great role. And you're asking that they still go through 3 further stages in the hiring process. By that stage, you have lost them. So speed is key. Run a short but thorough hiring process and be decisive about who is the right fit and who's not. And then if it's not right, move on to the next person, but don't sort of put them through the ringer. The other thing is that we're kind of touching on what you said earlier, Sinead, about people now having different priorities. We're spending a lot of time actually listening to our candidates and really digging deep on, why are you leaving your current role? What do you want from your next role and next employer? It might be salary, it might be flexible working, it might be that they have a side hustle and they want to work part-time so that they can focus on their own business venture. You need to listen to them. Everyone has got a different priority at the moment. And then if you can meet that, you need to speak to them and talk through why the role and why you as a business are a good fit for them, and how you're kind of ticking their boxes. The final thing, which we also touched on earlier, is virtual interviewing. So now everything is like this. It's all through a screen, and it's tough. It's really difficult to get a sense of things like body language and warmth through a camera. So we've also run quite a lot of like virtual interview training for hiring managers, just to make sure that they're coming across as lovely on screen as they would in person, because it's tough making that shift.
Thanks, Kate. Really great insights. So let's move on to talk about EVP and employer brand. So Sinead, employer value proposition, otherwise known as EVP, is rising in popularity, along with the concept of employer brand. What do you think our small to medium businesses need to know about this?
So your employer brand is essentially your reputation as an employer on the market. So that's kind of what the crux of it is. And I think this starts with your internal culture, how that is being projected externally. It includes things like your lists of benefits, your flexibility initiatives, your wellness initiatives. I think it also includes turnover and attrition and tenure, and also how you invest in your people. So whether that's learning and development, whether that's kind of investment in their growth, etc. So it kind of combines all of those things to result in a brand or a reputation in the market that employees or future employees and candidates essentially can figure out what you're about. So it's really the why behind people would want to work for you. I think in my experience, both in running a small business and also in recruiting for many over the years, is that within businesses that are of a certain size, you tend to build an employer brand quite organically. So many businesses do amazing things. They have amazing initiatives. They put their people first. They care about their people. It's more kind of getting to that next level of saying, okay, how do we articulate our EVP, our employee value proposition, and how can we actually define what that is? So what are and I think so many people today could kind of go away and say, what are the things we do for our employees? And I speak with so many businesses who kind of go, oh yeah, and we do this. Yep. Oh yeah, we also do this. And I'm thinking these are brilliant things, but they're not condensed anywhere. They're not kind of in a document or a one pager. So I think once you actually define what your EVP is, you can then bring that to market, and you can then leverage that in the market to attract good talent, to engage people throughout the recruitment process, and really just to kind of use it as a tool to highlight why someone would want to work for you over someone else.
Yeah, it's so true. And I've certainly noticed in interviewing senior candidates, there's been a real shift in the questions they ask you. And one that keeps popping up quite regularly is, Alex, what do you love about Employment Hero, and what's kept you there, and what attracted you to the role there? And that's all about them wanting to hear about your purpose and your meaningfulness as a business. Kate, do you think candidates are more aware of EVP and employer brand? And what kind of conversations are you having with candidates on a day-to-day basis around this?
Yes, they absolutely are. So things like Glassdoor, Google reviews, Seek reviews has just made it so much more accessible now for anyone that's job searching to build a bit of a picture of who the employer is and what it's like to work there. Even for really small businesses who maybe don't have a Glassdoor page yet, who might be listening in, you still have an EVP, you still have a reputation. We talk to each other as candidates. We know what's going on. If you've had an interview somewhere and it's been a really positive experience, you might tell your friends about it. Similarly, if it's been a really awful experience, you might tell your friends about it. So tech has definitely made it more accessible, but also if you're not on Glassdoor, if you don't have loads of Google reviews, don't think that it doesn't impact you. It still does.
Absolutely. And again, going back to candidates, they'll quite often bring up, look, no one's perfect. We've got some bad Glassdoor reviews, and they will say, oh, I looked up Glassdoor, and can you tell me about this review? What's the history behind it? So people are absolutely logging on to Glassdoor. Moving on to recruitment technology, which I personally think is life-changing in our roles. Sinead, what are your go-to tools at the moment?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Alex. I think our jobs have changed so much over the course of the last decade or two. And I think a lot of where we have benefited is around automation and just making the recruitment process happen a lot faster and more efficiently. In terms of the tools, like we use JobAdder, which is our CRM. I would highly recommend utilizing a CRM. I think the ability for a small business to store or tag resumes and potential candidates and potential future employees and applicants, it's invaluable. Having a good system around that, having someone in the business, in operations, who can create a process around what do we do with people who perhaps look good for us but not for this role, or look good for future, having something around that is so important. And it's something that I see a lot with the larger organizations that we work with. As soon as they reach a certain size, they have large talent acquisition teams, they have big databases, but it's something that's really lacking within the SMB space. So I definitely think that having a good CRM, and they don't need to be kind of massive, huge investments. It could be kind of relatively inexpensive as an investment initially. I definitely think as well, LinkedIn has been huge. It's not kind of groundbreaking in terms of a technology tip, but it's definitely increased. The use of LinkedIn has increased so drastically during the pandemic. And I think they have obviously they have their standard LinkedIn page. They also, or LinkedIn website, they also have LinkedIn Recruiter for headhunting and their talent insights. And we kind of utilize all of them for data, for market mapping, for headhunting, for approaching, for building personal brand. I think any organization who is looking to hire needs to be aware of having an online presence and a good kind of social media presence. It doesn't need to be that it's a huge kind of investment, but I think it needs to be managed, and it's minimum expectations for candidates that they'll go on and research, and they'll have something to research. I also mentioned Recruiter Insider. That piece of technology for us is invaluable. It fully syncs with our CRM, and at every stage of the recruitment process, as we're moving the stages along, our candidates and our clients and the people we engage with are surveying us and surveying the organizations that we work for. And so we make all of our decisions. We're very, I was going to say lucky, it's probably not lucky, but we're very privileged that we do rank very highly in that. We've been #1 in Australia for the last 2 years for the candidate experience side. And so that enables us at every point to look at, okay, what are we doing well? What can we be doing better? And it's all completely based on data, which is fantastic. So I think the really important thing to note with recruitment technology is that there's so many great tools out there, but it is still about making sure that you understand where you can personalize the contact and automate it to ensure that everyone's getting a response, to ensure that everyone feels like they've had a touch point, but then also not trying to automate the aspects where human interaction absolutely should be the first port of call. It should be that we are still meeting people, we're still sharing feedback in real time, we're having phone calls instead of shooting quick messages. So I think really understanding where to really add in the human kind of side of things is super important. And I think small to medium-sized businesses have a massive advantage over the corporates with that, because they tend to have to be closer to the recruitment process and have the ability to have more touch points.
Thank you. And Kate, I think this touches a little bit on Sinead's earlier comment around human kindness, which I love. How do you think that technology aids or perhaps hinders the candidate journey?
Yes, so following on quite nicely actually from what you were just saying, Sinead, I think when you're using technology well, it should drive efficiencies in your hiring process that ultimately result in a better candidate experience. If you're using tech to make life easy for yourself and save yourself loads of time, but actually it's not the best experience for the candidate, then it's probably hindering your process, even though you think it might be freeing up more of your time. So 2 examples that we use that are kind of really beneficial features. One is like a mass contacting tool within an applicant tracking system or a CRM, so that you can email several people at the same time. Let's say, for instance, you've just filled a role and you can see that there are 10 other people that applied that morning. It's really, really quick to email all 10 of them and say, I'm ever so sorry, we've actually just filled this role, but I would love to keep in touch. Here's my number, or here's my LinkedIn profile. And that's a much better experience for them than just not hearing back from you because you didn't have the time. Another really positive one is using like a self-scheduling link so that candidates can book a time in your calendar. Sometimes I think if you're working across different time zones, if you're doing anything international or maybe even just interstate, they'll try and call you at the time that's not best for you. So if you send a self-schedule link, you can quite quickly figure out when you're both free to connect. And it's a really good way of it just being done, no back and forth, and it's still a good experience for them. If you're a smaller business and you're thinking about what tech to invest in and what will suit you and your hiring process, you need to have a bit of a look at kind of what your process looks like and what makes sense for you. There is so much out there, but not all of it will be suited to your business needs. So a good example would be if you're a huge enterprise business and you get hundreds of thousands of applicants and your problem is almost you have too many people and you can't get through them all, you might use something like a resume screening software to help you to kind of reduce the numbers. Alternatively, if you're a really small business and your problem is that actually you only get 5 applicants, it's probably not worth your while to invest a lot of money in software that's screening resumes for you because you've only got 5 of them. So just take a step back, think carefully about what will benefit you and what your needs are, and then invest in something that makes sense and doesn't hinder the candidate process.
Love it. Thanks, Kate. We'll move over to Q&A before wrapping up. The first question is, how do you suggest responding to significant volumes of candidates to ensure feedback is given and is personal for each candidate without causing significant pressure to a small HR team? Kate, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So if you've got lots and lots of people and you're trying to personalize the feedback as much as possible, one approach would be to send everyone a message to let them know that unfortunately they've not been successful, and then maybe ask if they'd like further feedback. Send a self-schedule link and see if they can put time in the calendar to follow up and talk through specific feedback. Not every candidate will want specific feedback. They may already have got another role somewhere else, or maybe it wasn't their favorite or top of their pick anyway. So that's one way of handling it. Another way of doing it would be to go through everyone and sort of do them in bulk batches, right? So it might be that you've got 10 candidates who didn't get the role because they were too junior. So you can send them all a similar message, and then kind of follow through that same process with people who perhaps didn't meet the criteria for different reasons.
Great. The next question, how do you hold your people accountable for providing, oh, sorry, I lost the question then. How do you hold your people accountable for providing and maintaining that level of timely feedback and communication with the candidates? Do you want to take that one, Sinead, since you're busy coaching clients through?
Absolutely. Look, I think with this, it ties back through to your values. I think it needs to tie back into the essence of what your business is about, what your mission is, what you, I guess, why people are bought into your business, why your employees are bought into your business. When I think about Lotus and how from a leadership level, we hold our team accountable. We have SLAs, we have our kind of standard kind of operating ways of working, where it's a case of saying we get back to all candidates within 48 hours. We reply to every candidate email and return phone calls within 24 hours. We have a number of others on top of that for people who we engage with throughout the process, but it's spoken about, it's clear, and it ties in with the why of what our business is about, which is to be the best in candidate experience, and which is to treat everybody well. And I think it's then kind of making sure that throughout the entire process, people know how to do it. So the resistance to that will be if people feel like they don't have enough time, or if they kind of feel like it's a lower priority in comparison to other work that they're doing. And so if you can really understand, which is what I kind of mentioned earlier around overhauling a process, understand what your process looks like, and then understand where you're going to have those touch points, then it's a case of just making sure that it's kind of embedded in the DNA of the business of this is how we treat people. We want people to have a positive experience with us, and it might in some instances result in needing an extra kind of part-time headcount just to have an extra addition to the team because you perhaps need more resources, or it might just be that some aspects are automated. It might result in a change, but it's definitely something that needs to be kind of consistent with the why of what you do. And I think touching on what Kate was saying earlier, I mean, at Lotus, we get over 5,000 applications a month. And so that's a huge volume. And so for our team to go through individually and to coach all of those people individually, it would be absolutely massive. And so whilst I think there's kind of a line to dance there of whilst you want to be able to give a positive candidate experience, you can automate so much of those responses. We bulk batch. So we bulk batch candidates who aren't going to be right for us for any role. We bulk batch candidates who perhaps would be good for us in future, and they get a different response again. And so it takes a little bit more time, but it's not individually going into everyone and looking at their resume and kind of going down that road. It's obviously super time consuming. So yeah, that's definitely something that that we look at internally.
Yeah, in those bulk emails, we often get responses for people saying, thanks for getting back to me, even if it is just saying that you're not a fit for the role, because they often don't hear back from companies. So even that is a good experience. Okay. And from Amy, Sinead, Amy is asking what your survey tool is that you use.
Yeah, so it's Recruiter Insider. It is for recruitment agencies and for organizations as well. We used to, when I first set up the business, we used SurveyMonkey and talk about automation. Every single placement we made, one of us would go in and we would send out our little survey monkey survey, and we would get in touch that way. And it was so slow and so laborious. And when that was a perfect example of recruitment technology that just instantly met a need for us. And as soon as they came to market, we were one of the first early adopters, because it solved a massive problem for us. So would definitely recommend them, but there's also lots out there similar at this point as well.
I just to go back to the previous question, if I may, if anyone that's watching is in HR or talent and is having trouble perhaps getting feedback in a timely manner from everyone else involved in the hiring process, one tip that I have is to sort of schedule time in for the feedback straight after the interview. So let's say, for example, your hiring manager's interview is 45 minutes long. Schedule an hour and just set the expectation that the final 15 minutes is going to be them typing up an email or giving you a call and running through what the feedback is so that you guys can move quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and another great tip that we've done at Employment Hero is with hiring managers blocking out certain times in their calendar, so that when you're on the phone with a candidate, if you want to take them to the next step, you can actually look up the hiring manager's calendar and say, Dave is available at 2 p.m. every day this week. When can I book you in? And then you can book them in immediately without having to do that back and forth to try and get them calendared, which is great. And Bernadette, thanks for your question. You wanted to reiterate the 3 main reasons that our Insights study found as to why people are looking for a new role. So it's lack of career opportunity, lack of a pay rise, and lack of both appreciation as well as recognition. So if you can look at career development, if you can do pay rises, if you don't have a big budget, try and do something for your top performers and implement a reward and recognition system. So important, especially as we move to this remote or hybrid kind of way of working.
Mm-hmm.
The next question, where you require candidates undertake police or medical checks, would you still suggest waiting until these are back before offering a candidate the role? Or should we be acting more quickly and offering the role subject to police check, medical clearance once on hand? Kate, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would offer them subject to successful reference checking, medical checks, whatever it is that you need.
Great. And Sinead, Louise is asking, what is the system? Oh, survey tool, we've already done that one. Next question, do you have any statistics regarding which items in an EVP are viewed as more attractive by prospective employees? Or in other words, if we wanted to add to our EVP, what would give us the most bang for our buck? Sinead, you've probably, because you're working across different organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of data, specific data, I mean, Alex has obviously just mentioned that the guys at Employment Hero, they have a load of amazing resources constantly and also run surveys. So you kind of get up-to-date information as they're happening. Seek are also a fantastic source of data. Seek Insights, Seek Laws of Attraction, and they are often sharing kind of exactly what candidates are looking for. In this market, it is things like flexibility, work from home options, job security, and for the first time in a long time, or perhaps ever, salary has jumped to, I think it's number 3 according to Seek data, which obviously lines up with the survey that you guys have ran as well, Alex. So I think really honing in on the lifestyle aspect of your EVP is really the direction that candidates are going. I think when I first set up Lotus People, it was the first wave of kind of the tech companies really setting culture as a real focus. And it was things like ping pong tables and kind of casual clothes to the office. And that was so exciting for so many candidates. And we've obviously iterated away from that so many times over now. But I think where we're at now, the expectations, as we've spoken about a lot today, they've shifted so much. So yeah, I really think focusing on things that are really going to matter to people in their post-COVID lives, where we've all had so much time to reevaluate and reassess and think about what's important to us, that's definitely going to make sure that you get bang for your buck. And that obviously ties in with culture as well.
Fantastic. And the next question is kind of along the same vein, which is how could you entice more candidates to apply for roles that go beyond salary? Do you want to touch on that, Kate? So I guess it's kind of filling the top of the funnel. It's a lot of what Sinead just talked about.
Yeah, I think really you need to be shouting about why you're a great business to work for. So are you, for example, posting a lot on LinkedIn, and are your employees posting on LinkedIn? If you've all been out for a team lunch, or if they're really enjoying working remotely and they're in Byron Bay right now, are they posting pictures of it on LinkedIn? Encourage them to do that kind of stuff and kind of get the business's name out there. And if you have got awards or you do have really great perks, include them in the advert. Too often you'll go on Seek or LinkedIn and you'll see a position description, and it talks about 50 things that the company is expecting from the candidate, and there's not one single thing listed on there that you can give in return. So just make sure as well that you're advertising tactically and talking about the fact that it's going to be a two-way street.
Thank you. And Kimberly's asking what self-scheduler would be ideal for warehouse type roles. So Kimberly, a lot of ATS systems offer the option for you to directly link to your calendar, but I think it's free. It's also Calendary, which is a free app where people can schedule in to your calendar in your kind of open spots. And so again, self-scheduling, so you're making it a lot more efficient. Glenn's asking a similar question. What scheduling software are you using? Sinead's using JobAdder, who are one of our partners, and we actually use a system called Workable, and that they all interlink with your calendar, whether it's Microsoft or whether it's Google, and it really does create so much efficiency. Next one, Sinead, what are your thoughts on email responses through the Seek tool?
I probably couldn't comment on that because ours is fully integrated with JobAdder. We don't necessarily use that that kind of back end of Seek the way an organization would. Everything that we kind of use funnels through to JobAdder, and then we have everything set up and customized for us. If Seek has the ability for you to automate responses and for you to have touch points with any applicants, I would say go for it. I think the more touch points, the more, and even customizing that so it's less generic and has a bit of an imprint of your brand and your tone and your language, and it has a bit of personality to it. I think that is definitely the more kind of automated points of contact, the better.
And Nicholas is asking, is ageism, is this real? I certainly hope it's not. Kate or Sinead, do you have any?
It's a big question thrown at the
end.
Kate, do you have any immediate thoughts on that?
No, we certainly, that's the last thing we would take into consideration when we're looking at profiles. We're looking for people who tick certain boxes in terms of their experience. It's nothing to do with how long they have or haven't been in the workforce, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's so many different factors, and I think from our perspective as kind of the middleman and the kind of intermediary between the organization and the individual, it's all about sussing out not only what the organization kind of tells you they want, but also figuring out the people, the wild cards of people who we think mightn't even have everything on paper, but for some reason with their personality or their attitude, they can go across. And that definitely doesn't tie into age. I think it ties into attitude and kind of soft skills and obviously what they've done. But no, I don't think so. And I think honestly in this market, I'm seeing so many businesses just being so open-minded in who they're recruiting. They're maybe the type of businesses who would have said, I need someone with X amount of years experience or to have come from this certain industry. Businesses are being more open-minded and more aware of the fact that they can get great talent from perhaps not their traditional backgrounds.
Thanks. The next one is, what's the best approach to simplifying a complicated recruitment process?
Shall I take this one or do you want to take it?
Yeah.
I think really what you need to think about is if you've got a complicated recruitment process, what are you trying to get out of it? What are the things that you're testing for? Is it technical skills? Is it core competencies? Is it how they'll work well with the team? So sit down and have a bit of a think about what the key criteria are and what you're trying to get out of that hiring process, and then think about how you can condense it. So one good idea might be you might have a panel interview, for instance. If your concern is we want them to meet 3 members of the team, but we want it to be a short interview, get all three of them in the same room or on the same Zoom call and have all three of them ask a couple of questions each. That would be my main tip.
Yeah, great. And we've also introduced in Kate shortening the process here at Employment Hero, where you do an interview with two people and then they jump off and the next two people jump in, so that you're using an hour of the person's time without actually splitting that hour across 2 different days, for example, just creating efficiencies where you can. I love this question, Annette. As a hiring manager, I find calling the unsuccessful candidates that I interviewed to give them feedback really hard. Do you have any tips on what kind of feedback to give them to be respectful to them and to make it less uncomfortable for both parties? Before I throw it over to Sinead and Kate, Annette, you wouldn't be human if you didn't feel terrible. It's really, really hard. My piece of advice is just remind yourself that you are helping that candidate be better for their next interview. And I'll throw over to Kate and Sinead.
I think with that one, it definitely resonates. And when I first started in recruitment, someone said to me at the time, we're in the business of rejecting more than we are in the business of landing people their dream role. When you look at the numbers, that unfortunately is the way it swings. Look, I think from my experience in the vast numbers of candidates that we deal with across my team, individuals are so grateful when they've worked through a process with an organization who have taken the time to give them feedback. So rather than really nutting into exactly what you can say that will add value, I think know that the fact that you've picked up the call, taken the time, empathetically are sharing information over the phone, that is going a huge way to kind of creating a positive experience for them. In terms of what to tell them, I mean, anything that you can hone in on that they can improve on, even if it's one thing, I would just kind of focus on one thing that they could perhaps kind of take moving forward, but know that it doesn't come down to that. It comes down to the fact that you are being gracious enough to take the time to kind of value their time taken in the process and leave them feeling like, although they're disappointed, like they have not had a terrible experience with you and your business.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, I think as well, it can be a balance. So start with the positives in the same way as you might be giving a colleague constructive feedback. You might start with lots of positive things that they did in that meeting and then identify the one thing that they could have improved on. You could do the same with applicants. You know, we loved your confidence, we loved your energy, we loved your attitude. We think you get along so well with the team. However, for this particular position, we are looking for someone with more technical expertise in whatever the area might be. And unfortunately, on this occasion, there was another applicant that brought that to the table.
Fantastic, thank you. And Billy is asking, if you can see that a candidate clearly has none of the required qualifications, do you recommend that we still make contact and ask those questions to them anyway? I would say no.
No, yes. And I think engaging them when and you hone your kind of instincts the more and more you recruit. But if you know straight away that someone's not going to be right for a role, it wastes their time, it wastes your time when an email response that is tailored, pre-written, a template essentially, can be sent out, that can still have a positive impact.
Great. And Bianca is asking, as mentioned, tips on how to speed up the recruitment process for technical roles from, as you say, 5 steps to 2 steps, but still have a quality process and include testing, especially now that we're in this virtual interviewing world.
Kate, I feel like that's got you written all over it, that one.
If it depends what you mean by technical roles. If you're referring to example, something like an engineering role or like an analytical role where they're going to be using a lot of Excel or something, you can do what might be known as like a live test or like paired programming. So rather than giving them something to take home, when typically applicants want to impress, so they'll kind of labor over it for a whole week and then send it back a week later. If you do it live, like a paired programming test or a live Excel test, that can often speed things up, I would say, and can really help.
Great. So before, if you can both stick around, I'd like to move just to my last question, but we still do have 18 questions to respond to. But to kind of tie things up, what's your best takeaway or piece of advice?
I think for me, we've spoken a lot about talent acquisition and the recruitment process, but I think in this market, the biggest focus for any organization should be on retention. And Alex, you touched on reward and recognition programs. And I just think that replacing people in this market is going to be really, really tough. And so be mindful of the cost of recruitment, even if you're looking at salaries and budgets and increasing salaries. Think about, well, if you do lose people and you're paying under market, what's it going to cost you to recruit and bring someone in or have that role vacant? So really looking at valuing your people, what you're doing for your people, engagement surveys, engagement scores, just making sure that everyone's happy and content. That's kind of the biggest first step. And then from there, going and looking at your candidate journey and your applicant journey within the recruitment process.
Thank you. And Kate?
So I think my first one would be to focus on your reputation as an employer and really sell yourself. And that can have negative connotations when you say sell. I don't mean to exaggerate or not to be honest. I just mean to speak to the benefits that you offer and get them out there on LinkedIn or by word of mouth. If you're watching this and you're thinking, I don't know what benefits we offer, I don't know what we do that's nice for candidates, then start thinking about it. It doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. There are cost-effective solutions to that. You can do things like get your CEO perhaps to send a congratulations note when people have had a really successful month or a successful quarter. You might give someone half an afternoon off if they've had a really long week or they've worked really hard for you. I have a friend that works for a really tiny media agency, and when a new starter joins, there's a box of cookies on their desk on the first day. It's not a big thing, but it's just kind, and I think it shows that you're thinking about your people and that you care about them. My second tip is to be a bit more open-minded. So if you're hiring at the moment and you're really struggling to find someone, go back to the list of requirements. How many of them are actually requirements and how many of them will be nice to have? Can you take someone from a different industry? Do you have capacity to train a graduate? Start thinking about those sorts of things, and the results will really pay off.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And if you can stick around, I'll move to a couple more questions. Michael is asking, what IT platforms do you recommend for a small agency who's starting up, however, needs assistance in finding candidates, communicating with them en masse, runs as a CRM, candidate database, and integrates with LinkedIn and job boards?
I would say Job Adder. It's kind of cost per head per month. So for a startup, it's definitely not a huge outlay. There are similar platforms out there. A couple in particular that I know are huge outlays from an investment perspective for implementation, whereas the Job Adder isn't, and it's quite customizable as well. So that's definitely what I would recommend from personal experience.
Fantastic. And Chantel, for a small or medium company of 50 people with huge budget restraints who can't afford LinkedIn Recruiter, what are some of the out-of-the-box ways to headhunt?
It depends a little bit on the role. Referrals are a really good one. So incentivize your team to start thinking about friends or former colleagues that they can refer in. Again, it does not have to be a financial incentive. It might be you give them half an afternoon off if you successfully hire the person or something along those lines. You can also use social media without having to pay for it. So things like Twitter, if, for example, you're hiring for tech people, start following all the engineering networks and all the hashtags that are relevant to that on Twitter, and then see who comes up in those searches and maybe drop them a message.
And I would add to that as well, exactly as Kate said, thinking of social media, I think LinkedIn, the free platform, is kind of absolutely crucial when headhunting in this market. We are naturally, as an agency who have a big budget when it comes to being able to use talent attraction tools, we are finding that even our LinkedIn recruiter responses and emails are so low at the moment because everyone is receiving so many. So we've actually kind of almost pivoted slightly and gone straight to the free platform, and we're now utilizing all of our first connections, and we're getting in and asking directly for referrals and being really personalized with that. So I I would strongly recommend building out your networks and making time every day on LinkedIn to connect with relevant people, connect with the people you would be targeting, have them there so that in future, when you need someone within a certain vertical or role, you can go out to your first connections, and that pool is growing. And that's naturally something that recruitment agencies have a huge advantage over when it comes to just constantly investing in a network, but it doesn't mean that it has to just be us. It's something that, particularly with budget constraints in place, it's something that small businesses can do as well.
Great advice, thank you. And Taran is asking, do you have any suggestions around tools to use to help with onboarding documentation? It can often be held back by time-poor staff when not automated. Not just that, Taran, employee engagement and that first experience. Well, you know, of course, a huge bias towards Employment Hero, which automates all onboarding. You can send a contract out within less than 5 minutes once you make a verbal offer, and everything is paperless and online from that point on. Although if you don't have the money to invest, I believe that you can do certain things with Confluence, Jira, any of the systems that you might already have in place. But definitely whatever you can automate, it makes the candidate experience and the new employee experience so much better.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, Miriam. Would you give a provisional offer letter at the interview depending on references? Absolutely. We always offer based on successful references. One, you're able to hopefully close the candidate, and references can take up to 2 or 3 days to schedule and to get done. Anita is asking, do you have any tips on recruiting interstate? We have regional locations and have exhausted our local talent pools.
We have plenty of interstate staff. Any tips for it? I mean, it's the same process, really. Just take into consideration the time difference. The other thing to take into account is if you are hiring someone interstate or overseas, there are sometimes differences in the way that they need to be employed. We've got features and tools on our platform that help with that. So for example, if you're hiring someone overseas, let's say in New Zealand, the time difference isn't that great, but from a legal perspective, you need to take into consideration how it is hiring someone over there if you don't have an entity. So we do have a feature called Global Teams that helps with that, if anyone's interested in it. The other thing to take into consideration, will be time difference and public holidays and things that vary between states as well.
Fantastic. As a not-for-profit, we already have an EVP that focuses on working for a cause, purpose, and flexible working arrangements. What else would you recommend? We find employee testimonials to be really effective. So even doing a video with an employee, because videos are very appealing and engaging, and posting that on LinkedIn, again, it can be free and you can use your iPhone. You don't have to use anything that sophisticated. Sinead and Kate, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think definitely if you offer those great things, and I work with many nonprofits who do have great flexibility, they're great places to work. It's all about the culture. There's so much warmth there. There's so much purpose. So really the next step for you, given that you kind of have some great things in place, would be distilling that and then kind of projecting it outwards and conveying that to your potential kind of audience. And as Alex said, it's kind of video, being online, promoting that, as Kate said earlier, building an online presence on LinkedIn, getting your team to share that they love working for you, maybe create a hashtag, but yeah, something that really demonstrates that, not just internally.
And Jessica is asking, what would you recommend to enhance headhunt in-mail content, considering candidates are probably receiving 10 plus per month? So you can actually do voice messages now on LinkedIn, which are really, really effective. And then Kate's done a really awesome job of putting together specific PowerPoint presentations around different teams and why you would want to join those teams, with employee testimonials, with photos of them doing social things. Yeah, I'm not sure if you have anything to add.
Videos, you could try video as well. If there's a particular candidate you've seen on LinkedIn that looks absolutely amazing and you think this is the one, I've just got to get them, do like a really quick 60-second intro to yourself and just send a video across. That's really unique.
Fantastic.
We use the software Loom for that, and it actually works really well. We get a lot of responses of thank you so much, I love this video, we've seen so many emails, this is original. So yeah, doing something creative like a voice note or video is definitely standing out, I think.
Fantastic. And Clinton, if job security is highly valued, yet 66% of 18 to 24-year-olds are looking for the grass to be greener, we're dealing with fundamentally an expectation gap between current performance and perceived value by young people. If so, how should employers manage the expectation gap early in professional careers? That's a great question, Clinton. Make sure your managers are doing things such as regular one-on-ones where they're having discussions about careers. And a really big tip with us looking at attrition and retention, if a role opens up, look internally first and then backfill that more junior person, even if the person's not 100% ready to be promoted. Have that honest conversation and just say there is a bit of a skill gap. We're still going to promote you and we're going to invest in developing you into that new role. I'm not sure if Sinead or Kate has anything to add.
I totally agree.
Yeah, great. Jules, how can I attract remote areas that have a skill shortage from a metropolitan area? I think what you're asking is how do you attract people in a remote area? Make sure you're advertising your jobs as being fully remote. Before COVID, unbelievably, we would hire in Sydney with around a 20-minute commute time. Then we went remote and we started to hire all across Australia for our Australian roles. Our talent pool opened up enormously. We've seen the same thing in the UK. We're not just looking at London, we're looking at the entire, all of the UK, and it just opens up your talent pool enormously. The next one, how do you get the salary you deserve when moving roles internally being promoted? Too often you would get more money leaving the organisation, and this shouldn't be the case. How does an employee advocate for themselves? Really great question, and it is really hard to advocate for yourself, and all research also shows that females don't do a great job at doing that. You need data and benchmark data if you can get it, and you can get a lot of this online if you simply survey, salary surveys. You'll see a ton of them show up, and if you just show your employer that data and say to them, look, if I was offered this job externally, I'd actually be getting a 20% increase and you're only offering me a 10% increase. And that way you've got the data to kind of back yourself. Next question, what can you tell us about career journey planning? I'm asking from an end-to-end experience and creating longer lasting relationships between employers and employees. So that's a great question. And I think a lot of it comes down to those conversations. Managers quite often won't be bold enough to admit that they've never had a career conversation with their employees. So training your managers around that, providing them with templates. If you Google Grow, that's a great model to coach your employees through what they might want out of their career without you telling them. And just having those open-ended discussions on a regular basis is really important. That way you're not making it too formal either, especially for more junior people that might not know what area they want to move into. And make sure you're really open to letting people move functions. So if they're in people and culture, for example, and they want to go and try product, make sure you're open to that and that you're training your managers through it. The next one, this is fabulous. Thanks for organising, Sinead. Always good to hear you. Kate, agree from the lens of the recruiter. And Alex, thanks for hosting. Oh, thanks so much, Anu. The next one, how do you attract candidates who are not looking for work? Positions in family violence are going unfulfilled. 15 to 20 organisations are constantly looking for candidates, including ourselves. I think it comes down to being really proactive with your headhunting. All of the points we've said, start using videos, work on your EVP. What is it you're offering? If the positions are tough positions to be in, I can only imagine that they are quite stressful. Try and add what your support you're giving those people throughout their career journey. Kelly, we go through an agency for candidates and interview only a few. Should we be phoning the unsuccessful candidates ourselves or go through the agency? You're obligated to go through the agency. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, Sinead.
Absolutely. And I think the level of time and work that would go into that when you are engaging an agency and paying for an outsourced solution, there's absolutely no reason or need for you to take on any of that yourself other than managing the process for the successful candidates.
Fantastic. We still have 15 questions, so we might work on sending those out with some other information. We'll also send out, I think, our insight studies. So just so that you know, 41% of employees throughout that study said they wanted a job that they enjoyed. 39% that said they wanted a salary increase, and 28% said that they want a company that offered flexible working options, and 28% wanted a company within commuting distance, 24 a company with a good culture and friendly people, and 24% wanted a company that recognises and rewards people. So it all goes back to, all of the data is telling us a lot of the same things. So we will send that out to you, and make sure you show your leadership those statistics so that you are investing in increasing salaries where needed, reward and recognition, a meaningful purpose. And thank you so much, Sinead and Kate. You have just been wonderful and added so much value to everyone who's attended the call. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who attended. It's been a really great session. We look forward to next week's.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.